Welcome to Amici, News and Insight from the New York courts. I'm John Carr. For this Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month Diversity Dialogue, we are honored to have an opportunity to chat with Jeffrey K. Oing, an Associate Justice of the Appellate Division, First Department in Manhattan. Justice Oing is a native of Hong Kong, whose parents brought him to the United States at the age of 4 and raised him in East Harlem. As a student at Columbia in the 1980s, Justice Oing realized he had the gift of gab, we'll get into that later, and decided to pursue a career in law rather than medicine. That led him to New York University School of Law. He was admitted in 1990 and has spent nearly his entire career in the courts, starting as a court system attorney in 1993 and serving as a judge in 3 different courts. Last year, he was on the short list of candidates for chief judge. As a jurist on a very busy appellate court, Justice Oing seems universally regarded as a consensus builder. Justice Oing, thank you for coming on the program. Let's begin with your roots. Is your family Han Chinese, like I guess most people in Hong Kong?
Well, thanks for inviting me, John. Happy to be here. To quite frankly, to tell you, I'm not sure. I know my mom came from Shanghai and my dad came from Guangzhou. So Shanghai is sort of in the north, and I think my dad's province in the south. In terms of what there actually are, I have no clue. So I can't. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know the answer to that question.
That's understandable. Tell me about your parents.
Well, my dad, before he came to the States, he actually worked as a cook on those big boats, those big shipping boats that they had back in the day where they were transporting stuff and everything. So he was a cook. So he was always away. And my mom, she was a homemaker. And so when they left China, this has all happened after they left China. They left China, and got to Hong Kong. He was working on these boats as a cook. And that's how he learned how to be a cook. And my mom was, taking care of business. I think she was a sort of a landlord of sorts in Hong Kong in a building. And I kind of, I was born there with my sister, who's 9 years older than me. And I came to this country when I was 4 years old. I mean, the funny story is that they told me, and I don't know if this is true, my sister would tell me that I was so spoiled that, I guess at 3 years old, when I was going to grade school, the bus driver had to come off the bus to come carry me to the bus because I refused to go. So I don't know if I don't know how true that is. That could be totally embellished, but I thought, okay, fine, because they all said, you were a prince even way back when, and I said, okay, fine, because I'm the boy in the family, and in Chinese culture, the boy is always, they get the leg up, they get whatever they want from the chicken that's cooked.
That's kind of inconsistent with your reputation as a judge, I believe. Your reputation as a judge isn't someone who's stubborn and won't get on the bus. Your reputation as a judge is someone who is conciliatory and builds consensus. So somewhere along the line, you learned that.
Somewhere along the line, there was a pivot. There was a definite pivot. I like to think my wife did that.
Let's give her the credit.
I give her total credit for that. So so that's how, so I got here to the States when I was 4 years old. And just to segue into that, my parents came to this country for a better life. They wanted something better for themselves. They wanted something better for the kids, for us, my sister. But it was a hard life for them. My dad continued cooking. He worked in restaurants as a cook. My mom was a seamstress, and she worked in a garment factory. The unions were great. That was the whole, mobility process in terms of coming to America and being part of a union. Unions are special. They did a lot for my mom and for the family in terms of making sure healthcare and all that kind of stuff, even back then.
That's interesting because the unions have not always been receptive to immigrants who at a certain point they thought were a threat to their jobs.
Right. Well, I think when you came to this country, it was a different I mean, the garment industry is a different, I think it's a different makeup there. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, I mean, you had an influx of Chinese immigrants coming in, and a lot of these factories were downtown. They're all down, most of them were downtown in Chinatown, some were in Midtown. So my mom was traveling back, all over the place in terms of doing work and everything. But she was a seamstress. She knew how to get things done. Uh, and on the side, and I'm proud to say this, I mean, she also, was a housekeeper. She took care of people's apartments. I mean, she did everything she, could to, put food on the table, a roof over their head. Dad was working in the restaurants, what seemed like 24/7, in terms of just getting a paycheck at the end of the day. And that's where I think I learned, just watching kids. When you watch your parents work and struggle, you kind of appreciate everything you have.
Hmm.
They never for once, I never for once thought I was poor. They always made sure there was always food on the table, roof over their head. And it resonates with me, sort of like, even to this day, I'm always want to make sure there's enough in the bank. you know,
I understand that.
I
Now, why
kind
did
of
your
look at it.
parents come to New York City?
This was everybody. Everybody was coming here. They didn't want to get transplanted to California. We had a lot of relatives in California, but we flew right to New York. We came right to New York. We didn't even stop off in California. And the first landing spot we had was we lived in a tenement on 105th. I'm trying to think now. 115th Street between Second and First Avenue. I remember that. We lived in a tenement, and then we moved from that tenement, and this was in 1967. I was 4 years old. We moved from that tenement to all the way to 550 West 125th Street, which was all the way uptown to they had NYCHA housing there, and I lived there for several years, and then I ended up for the last 50 years over at Franklin Plaza, which is at 1941 Third Avenue, which was on 107th Street and Third Avenue. Franklin Plaza, which is a Mitchell Lama projects, Mitchell Lama housing complex. Uh, and it was great. I mean, my parents just lived there until a couple years ago when my father passed away because of COVID. I mean, not so much
Wow.
COVID, but he was just old. He passed away, and my mom lived there until last year when we finally had to move her into a rehab facility. Um, but growing up there, you know what? There was a large contingent of Shanghainese people in Franklin Plaza. It was almost a little small Chinatown in a sense.
Huh.
Everybody from my mom's province was there. They were all Shanghainese. It was amazing, you know. I didn't feel like it was like, oh, okay. I mean, we had all these friends, all these relatives planted in Franklin Plaza. It was the funniest thing.
Huh. So you did or you didn't feel like an outsider as a young
No, never
immigrant in this
felt like
country?
an outsider at all. No, not at all. I mean, I mean, when in the summer months we go downstairs and all the elders were all sitting around talking speaking in their dialect and everything. It was almost as if, oh, okay, never thought twice about where I was, you know.
Huh. Huh. Now, how did you end up with such an Americanized name as Jeffrey?
So, when we got here, my father's godfather gave me that name. And that's how I got it, and I kept it. I thought it was, I didn't know anything at 4 or 5. Who, whatever they gave it to me, and that was it. And that's how I got that name. My father's godfather gave me the name.
What was your name before then?
It was the Chinese name. It was pronounced, the Cantonese pronounced it as Ka Kui, Kakui. So it's Ga Gert. If you pronounce it in Mandarin, now I'm not perfect in Mandarin, but I think it's Ja Ju Ja Ju. It's like more of a J sounding and less of a K sounding in the dialects. But don't hold me to that. I'm not good at that. Here's the funny story about my Chinese. Uh, you know, I'm struggling with Chinese. I try to speak the language at home, and one night, this had to be when I was probably a teenager, and I'm speaking at the dinner table in Chinese, in Cantonese, because I did go to Sunday school for like a few years, and I just cried my way out of that. And my mom said, "Fine, don't go anymore." So at the dinner table, when I'm trying to speak the language, the Cantonese language, my mom stopped me and said, "Please speak to me in English. I can't understand you." And I just sat there, and my sister was laughing so hard, and my dad was shaking his head, and I'm like, "Okay, I get it." But that didn't dissuade me. I've always tried to speak the language. And here's another funny story. So it sort of carried a little bit to what my mom did, but this is something that's I like is good about me, that I don't give up, even though if I'm embarrassed, I'll continue to do it. So I go into uh, there was a tea shop in Chinatown called Hop Sing. It's off the Bowery. And my brother-in-law said to me, "Go inside, Jeff, and get me a tea with milk with extra sugar." I said, "Okay, fine." I run inside a tea shop. It's lined up. It's the old-fashioned coffee shop. You got a counter, you got some stools there. You have all the elders all sitting there drinking their tea, having their breakfast. I go in and I ask for the tea with milk and extra sugar. And the server behind him looked at me. He says, "Okay." And he does it. And then the old guys, the elders were all chuckling. They're laughing. I'm like, "What are they laughing at? It's a simple thing. I just asked for tea, milk, and sugar, right?" So then when the guy gave me the order, I repeated to him and I said, "Did you put extra sugar?" So he repeated exactly what I said. And then all the old guys fell off the chair. And I'm like, "Why are they laughing?" And I don't understand that. So as I walk out the door, it dawned on me. Instead of asking for sugar, I asked for salt. And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I did that." So they're all laughing. I'm looking back. They're still laughing. And they're like, I said, "Okay, I got it." But it didn't dissuade me. I still continue to speak Chinese, or try to speak. It's the dialect, the Cantonese dialect.
But what did they put in this? But what did they put in the
He put
tea?
sugar.
Sugar or
He put
salt?
sugar. Yeah, he put sugar. But he just had to imitate what I was saying, and it was like, "Oh, okay, I get it." But I didn't understand why everyone's laughing. They got a great roaring laugh that morning. I entertained them for like 5 minutes.
Was it important for your parents for their children to retain and honor their heritage? And if so, how so?
For me to retain my heritage, I never got that sense. I know that every Chinese New Year, my mom, particularly my mom, tried to retain the customs of the old ways in terms of welcoming in the new year. We would have midnight a meal. Like I'd be fast asleep and I'd be awakened at midnight to like a table full of food, and there's like you burning incense and you have seats around the table. And I questioned them. I asked my sister, I go, "What's going on?" She goes, "Oh, that's all the ancestors. They come back, they eat uh, from beyond." So it's like you have the meal out there, and then when midnight strikes, so a little before midnight, we sit down, we partake in the meal after the ancestors have eaten their meal. So we don't have that anymore, and I kind of miss that. That was something that was unique, and my mom really put a lot of effort into that. That was a big deal for her. We'd have the chicken, we'd have the fish, we'd have every single uh, 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 item that was necessary to welcome in the new year. Uh,
It
So
sounds like
that
in general your parents were very intent on becoming American.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they held on to the old stuff. I mean, but for the most part, they never, they didn't really pass along those things to me. And my sister still does a little bit of it, but not as much, not as like drill it into you. This is the way you have to keep going. And my kids don't never experience that. They never experience that midnight dinner. My wife did, and I mean, my wife's Chinese also, and she experienced it the first year after we got married. She goes, "I can't do this. I can't eat a meal at midnight. That's crazy." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Let's fast forward a bit. I mentioned earlier that as a teenager, you realized you had the gift of gab.
All right.
Explain, please.
I just, I remember when being in high school, I went to LaSalle Academy, which is down here on the Lower East Side, 2nd Street and 2nd Avenue. And I just love chatting away. I just love talking. I mean, I'd never had a problem. If you were stick me in a room with people that I didn't know, you come back a half an hour later, I'd be gabbing with at least 10 of them. Somehow, some way, I just like just chatting about, and I was not so much chatting, but so much I developed something where I really wanted to find out about the other person. So I would oftentimes ask them, talk to me about, tell them, have them tell me what their interests are, what they do, what's going on, because I was just curious, to see. And then so that's how and I carry that to this day. Every time I'm in a room with new people, I'm always interested to learn about them, because they know about, I mean, they can read about me, they know about me, but I'm really interested about them. I want to know what their story is. Uh, and it's sometimes, when they tell me their stories, I say, oh yeah, I mean, we all live like 6 degrees of separation. I said, yeah, and there's a connection there. And it's really nice
Mhm.
for that to happen. So
That's
that's where I
interesting.
think the gift of gab comes from.
That's fascinating. Now, as a law student, what was your plan? Was it always your thought that I'm going to go to law school and become a judge?
The plan was to cradle to grave, go to a law firm, become a partner, and that's it. It never dawned on me to even become a judge. Never even thought about it. I actually, even after I did a clerkship after I graduated law school. I clerked for the Chief Justice in New Jersey, Robert Willents, which was an eye-opening experience. I mean, the guy was brilliant. I mean, he used the dictaphone to dictate his decisions. I'm like, how do you write something? How do you write a decision like that? And one time he wrote this massive decision on the funding education, or the educational funding case that went down in New Jersey. And he dictated a 60, 70-page decision by dictaphone. And then he gives it
Wow.
to us. He gives it to us. He says, I want you guys to look it over and, edit it. And we read it. It's like, how do you edit something that's already flawless? I mean, it's like we all kind of shook our heads, like, I don't know what to do with this. But that was an eye-opening experience. And I think that kind of spoiled me in the sense that uh, I saw what that's like, and I thought this is something interesting. This is good. You're actually you actually don't have a skin in the game. You're just trying to get it right. And that was something that kind of stuck in my head going forward. Uh, but still, not thinking of ever becoming a judge. Never even thought of still becoming a judge.
How did you position yourself to become a judge?
Well, I think I started in when I started working for Judge Tallow uh, in 19 I'm trying to think now, in 2000. I went back, I was up here at the Appellate Division. So my career path was, I was practicing law. I went to the governor's office in New Jersey for a little bit, and I went back to private practice. And then I found my way to 60 Center Street, which has a law department. They have a pool of court attorneys that help draft decisions for judges. And I got a job there, and it was nirvana, John. I mean, it's like, this is what I want to do. This is great. I mean, I'm writing, researching, and writing, which is what, going back to my clerkship, is what I enjoyed doing. I mean, I enjoyed dealing. I mean, it was fun dealing with clients, but after a while, client contact is highly overrated,
Hmm.
so to speak. So I started doing what I enjoy doing, and I did that for 2 years. And then I guess my work was good enough that a judge called me. I got a call from a judge saying, would you want to work for me? Because my law clerk's leaving. And I said, okay, great. And I took that opportunity. I went to work for her, and I got to work on some incredible decisions. One of the decisions that I worked on was the one that was a First Amendment case back in two, back in 1990. I'm trying to think now, 95, 96, probably 95, 96. That's when Rudy Giuliani was mayor, and they had just passed a new zoning regulation to zone all the sex shops out of Times Square. So she ended up getting the case, and I worked on that case. I worked on the First Amendment aspects of that case, and it was a thrill to work on that case. And then from there, just to give you an idea of why I decided to become a judge, I went to the Appellate Division up here, law department, and started working on bench memos for the panels for their appeals, and that was eye opening because I started doing criminal work. And then from there, I went back down to the trial courts, worked for Judge Talib, who then gave me the ideas. You can do this. You can be a judge. You got to think about that. I mean, you got the talent. Did you ever think about that? I never thought about it until then. And I thought, okay, I could do that. So then I joined a political club. I started, yeah, I started using my gift of gab and just go out there and start chatting with people, talking. People all know when you start going to these events, they know you want to be a judge. You don't have to tell them anything because they know it right away. And for me, I was a rarity. There weren't many Asians running for judge back in 2000. At the time, who was it? It was Peter Tom and Doris Lynn Cohen, who were the elected judges in New York County. They were elected. You had a handful that were appointed by the mayor, none appointed by the governor at that time back in 2000. So it was very, it was lonely. So when I went to all these meetings and these dinners and everything, I was the only guy. So it was great. Everyone knew my name. So it was perfect. And I got to talk to people, chatted with people. Um, and then from there, I just kept going and going. And then I ended up working for Gifford Miller in his general counsel's office, which is sort of how I really expanded my outreach in terms of getting to know people and people getting to know me. So that when the time came in 2003, I was able to secure a judgeship, getting elected to civil court in New York County. So all those points that I described to you were building blocks for me along the way, both for my legal ability as well as my being able to build a community of support for me. So that's how
So
I
it's
got there.
so it sounds like being Asian was somewhat of an advantage and that you stood out among the
Yep.
other people in the room.
Yep, absolutely. Back in 2000, yep, I did. So I mean, after Peter Tom and Doris Lynn Cohen, and I think there was another judge who was elected, Dorothy Chin Brandt. I was the fourth. I was the fourth judge of Chinese descent to get elected in New York County, which was a pretty big deal. That was a real big deal.
Certainly, certainly, certainly.
And then when
Now
I got
you're
to
us.
elect, yeah, I'm sorry. And then when I got to elected to Supreme, that was even a bigger deal in 2010 because at that time, only Peter Tom and Doris Lynn Cohen were elected Supremes in New York County. So when I got to be elected, I was number three. So that was a big deal.
What did it mean to you and other Asian Americans when Justice Randall Oing, now the retired PJ of the Second Department, became the first Asian American ever to serve as a presiding justice in state history?
I think that shattered all the myths about, there's this myth out there, or at least a perception, and I think it's wrong, that Asians can't be leaders. Asians don't have the ability to be in in an area to uh, we're we're looked at not as someone that can come up and be part of a. I'm trying to think of the word. I can't think of it, but it's almost as if they think we're the view is, and I think it's an incorrect view, and that we're shattering that, is that we're not able to come up with ideas. We're kind of hard workers, and we kind of just put our nose to the grindstone. We don't have that sort of, we're not viewed as, management capability. And I think
Hmm.
when Rando became, yeah, and that sometimes you can see that, you sense that sometimes, and so that when Rando became the presiding justice, he shattered that myth right away. I mean, that's something that I sense sometimes, or at least it's wrong. And I don't feel that way because I've demonstrated my capabilities. But you hear my colleagues, or you hear other folks, attorneys, who talk about that, how they're viewed as more as the hardworking guy, hardworking person, and less person who can run or manage a company.
Hmm.
And it's the sort of the docile image that we have, and I think it's
Kind
all
of
for
the worker bees, huh?
yeah, the worker bees, correct, absolutely,
Interesting.
not the guys that can run the outfit, but the workers.
Huh. Now, there has not ever, to this day, been an Asian American on New York's highest court, the Court of Appeals.
Right.
Oh, a little over a year ago, you were on the short list for chief judge. You were bypassed by the governor that time, as were 6 other people. How big of a disappointment was that to you on both a personal level and in terms of what that might have meant to the Chinese community, the Asian community?
It was not. No, it wasn't a disappointment. I gotta tell you, when I got the call to tell me I was on the list, the short list, it was it was right before Thanksgiving dinner. I remember this because we were cooking the turkey, and I jokingly said to Hank Greenberg, who called me, I said, "You almost made me drop the turkey." You know that, right? And he's laughing. Uh, I don't. I wasn't disappointed at all by not getting nominated by the governor. What I looked at it as getting on that short list is to show, or at least to tell everyone that again, like Randy, like Randall, I kind of shattered that image, like saying that we're not capable of leading or we're not capable of being managers. You know, that and that being on that short list demonstrate, yeah, we're here, we can do it. Folks that look like me can be managers and can uh, run a company. So I wasn't. I was very uh, happy to be on that list to at least show to folks behind me they're moving up the ladder because now the Asian representation on the bench is is larger. I mean, it's getting close to the percentages of population that we have. It's not there yet, quite there yet, but it's a heck of a lot better than when I got first elected back in 2003. No question. So we're making headway. We're making strides. But, it takes a generation to do that. I mean, that's just the way it is. So no, I wasn't disappointed not getting it. I was very happy to be on the short list. Uh, you know, and I'm hoping somebody someday will be there. We'll get there.
I'm sure that will happen. I think it'll be sooner than later,
Yeah,
but yeah. The last I checked, there were 40 states with no Asian representation on their high court, which may go back to that worker bee image we discussed a moment ago.
right. I mean, you also have to look about demographics too. I mean, of the 40 states, I mean, how many? I mean, not all 40 states are going to have a large Asian population, or at least a population that's going to. I mean, I don't know in terms of the how many Asians are attorneys in these states, in these 40 states. I would imagine some don't have any,
Hmm.
so that it's almost when the numbers are not there, it's kind of hard to figure that out. I mean, I'll point out one thing. I'm an Asian of Chinese descent sitting here on the first apartment. The only if when I retire, I don't know if you know this, but I'm retiring at the end of this year. I've decided
Oh,
to
I didn't
retire.
know that.
Yeah, I've decided to retire at the end of the year. I have the years and the age, and I thought, you know what? I think it's time to do something else. And if my mom were here, I could hear her tell me in my ear, "You're lazy." She would tell me I'm lazy, but I don't want to work like them to the bone. I mean, they work to the bitter end. I don't want to do that. But in terms of feeding the appellate division, you can only get to the appellate division if you're an elected Supreme Court judge. So New York County only has one remaining elected Supreme Court judge, and that's Margaret Chan. So I'm really hopeful that the governor sees this and brings her up because I'm a true believer in it's optics, right? You got if you look at the bench, I mean you want to maintain that sort of balance, right? And I'm really hopeful that that's the case. And again, this goes to your point about how there are 40 states that don't have
Mhm.
Asians on the highest court. It may be because the pipeline's not there for that to happen. I mean, if Margaret Chan wasn't elected Supreme, I retire. That's it.
There's no
There's
one
not
else in the
even
pipeline.
there's
Right.
nobody else in pipeline at all. Exactly. So, that's where we're at. Whereas in Brooklyn and the second apartment, there's a nice pipeline on that side. They've got a few elected Supremes who are of Asian descent, which is great. I mean, so they're doing very well on that side of the river. So, that's where we're at this point.
I'd like to segue into a couple of your extracurricular activities. One, language access, and the other organization is kind of dear to my heart, the Franklin H. Williams Judicial
Yeah,
Commission.
yeah.
Let's start with language access. Why is that important to you?
Language access was very important to me when I got asked to join because of my parents. They struggled with the language. My mom, the Sunday school that I went to for 4 years that I cried my way out of. When I went to Sunday school to learn Cantonese, my mom went to Sunday school to learn English. So, that was for her. I mean, she wanted to learn the language. And I saw the struggles that she had. And then they opened up. And the other thing I didn't mention to you is at one point in their lives, my dad decided to open up his own Chinese takeout. So my mom,
Huh.
because she learned the language, she was able to run the counter as best as she could with me there and with my sister there, and my dad was cooking. So language is a real big deal for me, and that's another reason why I knew I had to do well in school because I didn't want to work I knew exactly where I was going to be every summer of every year. It was slaving away in a hot restaurant kitchen. And I said, I can't do this. This is not my life. And my parents didn't want that life for me. But that's something that's also another part of me in terms of who I am and my makeup, because I know what hard work is. And to tell you, being a judge, I mean, I love what I do. It's not, doesn't do damage to your hands, right? Or your back. Um, so language is very special to me because I watch folks struggle, not just Chinese people, but any person who doesn't speak the language struggle. And I wanted to make sure. And when I was a judge in civil court, I was always very cognizant of folks who didn't speak the language to make sure that there was an interpreter there to help them or assist them. And the other thing about that, the flip side of that is I'm also part of the Chinese American Planning Council. I'm on their board, which is a social service organization that is for addresses Asian needs, but we've expanded to address all needs for all people who are, in terms of low income areas. We provide for housing, educational facility. We're located on the Lower East Side. Now we have Reach in Brooklyn and Queens. And language is another big deal. We want to make sure or ensure that all the folks who come to our services get that assistance that they need. So language is a big deal for me, just because of
I
who
can
I
understand.
am.
I can understand that. Imagine having to go to court and not being able to communicate, and how
Right.
terrifying that would be for someone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, and when I was in civil court, lower civil, I try to make sure that the people who came in without lawyers were understood that it was, don't be scared. I mean, they're all scared. I mean, everyone's nervous, scared, and I try to put folks at ease. Just try to do the best we can, and I think the attorneys appreciated that because it's hard work for the attorneys who are there representing a client, but the other side doesn't have an attorney, and I'm trying to work things through, and I think and try to take a lot of pressure off the lawyers, which helps them too. I think they appreciated that. So yeah, that language access, the time on the language access committee was very educational for me, and I learned a lot. I hope I did
I'm
some
sure.
good too.
I'm sure you did. Franklin Williams.
Yes, dear
The
to my heart.
commission is the first court-based entity in the nation committed to racial and ethnic fairness in the courts. Why did you want to become a commissioner? Why did you want to be involved with that?
I think it's a great organization. It's a great commission to be a part of. They have great ideas. I just wanted to be a part of something that was special. I thought that it was an honor to join them, and they do great work. So the Williams Commission is a force to be reckoned with. It continues. It holds everybody's feet to the fire, which is what you need, because otherwise you sort of regress and you forget, right?
Well, Franklin Williams is a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. I mean, otherwise, I'm a strong believer that you have to be constantly reminding people, because if you don't remind people of the past, they'll forget it, and that's not a good thing.
No, it isn't. Do you have a family?
Yes, wife and 2 kids. My oldest, our first passed. We lost our oldest to an accident
Oh
back in
no.
2004.
Oh, I'm so
Uh,
sorry.
yeah, that so David's still with us, but that was pretty traumatic. But then Laura is with us, and then Kevin came later on. So we have 2 kids, and you know what? They're my pride and joy. They keep me going. They keep me they keep me young. I'm like I'll pediatricians put it best: little kids, little problems; big kids, big problems. And my wife is great. She's I've known her since she was a senior in high school, and I met her when I was at Columbia. I was a freshman at Columbia, and the following year after me, we were going. Columbia at that time in 1982 was still all male, so she would have been the first all female. She would have been in the co-ed class coming in. So I met her at a recruitment drive when she was a senior in high school, and we sort of stayed in touch all throughout the years. And I kind of kid with her because she let slip that with the first time she saw me, she thought she could marry me. So we got married in '89, and it's almost we're 35 years married now, and it's been an absolute joy. And I never look back. It just blew right by. I can't believe 35 years flew right by. And,
Yeah.
and to go back to an earlier point, she really, transformed me as to who I am. I mean, she would be my conscience. I wouldn't sort of agree with her right away, but she knows that later on I'd come back and say, you're right. She would tell
I
me,
think it's
Jeff, you can't
similar in
do
my
that.
house.
Yeah, Jeff, you
Yeah.
can't do that. That's not a good thing. I'm like, okay, okay. And she's
What
very
what's
good
her
with the
what's her
kids.
name?
Her name is Mary. Mary. It's Laura, Kevin, and Mary, and she's a real good listener. The kids all gravitate to her, and I'm a firm believer that there has to be at least one parent in that group that the kids going to want to run to and talk to, and they always run to talk to mom, which is a good thing. Mom sometimes gets tired of it, but she says, you know what? I'd rather them come to me and talk to me then I don't know what they're going to do. And I said, okay, that's a fair point. Dad has a dad's old school, because I was raised with parents who are like, you figure it out on your own. Her dad ran a laundromat, and this is why we are who we are in terms of character and in terms of disposition. Her dad ran a laundromat in the South Bronx, in the shadows of Yankee Stadium, and put 5 kids through college through that laundromat. I mean, that's how amazing that is. Her dad was so wanted to be such an American that when the wife was pregnant with their first child in Hong Kong, he made her get on the plane 9 months pregnant to get to the U.S. because he wanted that child to be born here in the States. And
Wow.
my mother-in-law, God bless her, will complain bitterly to me about that, saying, your father-in-law, he made me get on the plane 9 months pregnant to have, the child here in the United States. I can't believe he did that.
What is the one thing you wish Native born Americans better understood about immigrants in general and Asian Americans in particular?
I think native born Americans need to understand that immigrants are no different than the native born. They all want the same thing. They want a better life for themselves, for their children. They want to capture that American dream, which for me, I'm living the American dream, if not exceeding the American dream. I have to tell you, John, when I got elected to civil court, that was an amazing moment for me. I think for my parents who didn't understand. I mean, my parents wanted me to be a doctor. I couldn't pass chemistry. I couldn't do it. So this was the next best thing. But when I got elected to Supreme, it really hit me hard because they gave me the part in the courtroom that I was a law clerk. So when I got back to my courtroom as a judge now, sitting behind the desk, my law clerk comes in and she saw me. She said, "Are you okay?" I said, you don't know what this is. This is like an incredibly moving experience. I'm sitting on the other side of the desk now. And I'm actually signing orders. I mean, my first day there, I just had to sit there and take it all in. and they gave me the chambers that I was a law clerk in too. That I just it was an incredible moment for me. I think we all have the same goals. We want the best for our families. I think there's enough of the pie to go around for everybody, and I think people have forgotten that. And I think I wish my observation is I wish that the folks that are higher up that are doing things would tell people, at least explaining to people, the pie is pretty big. We all don't need to have the largest slice, but if everybody can get a slice, I think that would be a good thing. So that's what I would like for folks to realize and understand.
What a wonderful way to end. Judge, thank you so much for your time and your insight and your wonderful stories.
Well, thanks so much, John, for doing this. I really enjoyed meeting you and doing this.